Hey everyone, Nick from Modaddling here, and in this video I'll go through how to create calculated tables using DAX in Microsoft Excel the same way you can create them in Power BI. Now calculated tables are quite useful because a DAX functionality has all kinds of different functions to calculate random tables from all kinds of data. You can use things like the summarize table function as well as the DATATABLE function. But using them in Excel can be a bit cryptic and difficult because whereas Power BI has an easy way to add calculated tables, Excel does not. So this video will show you how you can use those functions in Excel. Now let's get into it. Now to explain why being able to calculate DAX table can be useful, we've got the following scenario. We've got a balance sheet report that gives us the closing balance values for every given fortnight. And what we want to try and do is produce a balance sheet cash flow report that gives us the movement between the closing balance of the previous fortnight and this fortnight. To do that sounds fairly straightforward. We basically will calculate a value for a given fortnight, and we want to create another measure that's going to be the value for the previous fortnight, and we can then do the change as the difference between the two values. But in order to do that, we need to have a common table of all the different fortnights available in our report. In our balance sheet data table, we've got all the data, and we've got this as of date that gives us all the different fortnights we want. So ultimately, we want to be able to produce this table of just the dates very quickly. And the reason we want this table is so that we can then have the date of the fortnight, as well as, if we go to Power Pivot, what the date was the previous fortnight. And that can just be a simple date add of subtract 14 days from the previous date. Now the question is, how can we actually create this table of all unique fortnight dates from this data without having to load it into Power Query? And the perfect function we can use is this summarize table that exists in DAX, where we can actually say summarize a table, create a new table of all the unique dates. And we've got the data in this balance sheet. So how do we go about doing this? Because this workbook already has connections using Modaddling, I'll show you how to do it using the existing connections button. I can go to the Data tab in Excel and choose existing connections, which brings me all the connections in this workbook. Now I could technically choose any one of these connections. I'll use the balance sheet data to make it slightly simpler, but any one of those would do the same result. I can then choose open. I can tell it to add a new table to a new workbook, and I want to make sure that the add this to the data model is ticked. I can then click OK, and it's created a new Power Query or a new table based on an existing connections. It's not actually a new Power Query. Now from here, I can right click anywhere in my table, choose table and edit DAX. And this allows me to actually create whatever DAX I want inside this table. I can change it from table, balance sheet data to DAX, and I can type in any expression I want. I'll start off with evaluate, which allows us to evaluate any DAX that we want. And I'll use the summarize function. I'll want to evaluate the summarize of the balance sheet data table, and I want to summarize or group by my dates. So I'll choose as of date column. I could make it more complex, but for the purpose of what I'm trying to showcase, I'll keep it nice and simple. I can then click OK, and you can actually see the sheet is now just pulling my unique dates because it's summarizing this balance sheet data that's inside Power Pivot and giving me all my unique dates. I can then rename the sheets to dates. I could rename the table to dates, and I can save the workbook. Next, we'll check to see if the table's been added to Power Pivot. So we'll go to Power Pivot tab and click the Manage button. If it's in the list, great. And if it's not in the list, we can close this screen. We can select anywhere in the table, click Add to Data Model, which will bring the table in. Finally, we can add the calculated columns, measures, and relationships to make it all work as a cash flow report. To finish off the example, I'll go through that. So first off, we'll add an as of date LF column, and we'll make it equal to date add of the dates as of date minus 14 days. Now the issue we'll get with the date add function is it can only calculate a date if that date actually exists. And because there's nothing before the 21st of July, we've got this blank entry, and that'll cause us issues if we want to add a relationship, because we can't have a blank entry. So to fix that, we'll just add a bit of extra validation. If is blank, then we'll return a 0. Otherwise, we calculate the date the same way as before. And that's there to ensure that we've got a dummy value. We'll select the column, and we want to make sure it's set to date data type. Finally, we can add our relationships. So I like doing it from the Design tab, Manage Relationship Dialog, bring that across. So I'll be able to create one between our balance sheet data as of date column and our dates table, and I'll make that active. And I'll repeat the process, but for the other calculated column. But I'll need to make this one inactive because I can't have two relationships active between two tables at the same time. That's the relationships done. Finally, if I go to the balance sheet table, I already had my calculation for my balance sheet closing value. So I'll add the previous month's closing value as well as the variance. I'll select a new row, BS amount last fortnight. We'll make it equal to calculate the BS amount. But in this case, use relationship between our balance sheet data as of date and our dates, but as of date LF, so the other relationship. Look at the formula, make sure I haven't made any mistakes, and that gives us the balance sheet of the previous fortnight, and the difference, BS movement, will be equal to the balance sheet amount minus the balance sheet amount of the previous fortnight. Now, technically, I need to add more validation to do with blanks and zeros, but I won't worry about that for now, and just add that measure in. I can then close and apply. Finally, I'll create the report. So I'll just duplicate the balance sheet report I've already got, move or copy, move to the end. And to make this one work, what I'll do is I'll remove the as of date because I want to grab the as of date coming from my dates table. Now that's important because it needs to be based on the relationship in order for my measures to work. So I'll drag that in. And I'll remove all those other fields that I don't need. I just want the single date. I'll remove the BS amount measure, and I'll drag the BS amount movement measure. I should have probably formatted it better than what it was, but that's pretty much the movement between the two different periods. Now, the previous approach works well if you've actually got an existing connection you can leverage off, But you don't actually need to have an existing connection. You can completely do it from scratch, although it leaves a few more artifacts that you need to clean up. So to do that, we can go to the Data tab in Excel, and we can choose the From Table Range to quickly create a Power Query that points to a single cell. Once we've got our dummy Power Query, we can choose Click and Load To. And importantly, we need to add this to the data model, make sure we've got tables so we can actually see the table to change the DAX, and add it to a new sheet. Now this is our skeleton we can use. So from here we can right-click Table and edit DAX the same way as before. We can change the command type to DAX. And if we jump to the learnmicrosoft.com website, I'll grab this DAX syntax to copy. I'll make sure I don't grab the equal in front because I don't want that. And in this expression, I'll make it evaluate, important, and paste the DAX. I can then click OK, and that's my table created. Now, I still need to load it to Power Pivot, and I still got a few artifacts that I don't need. Technically, I don't need this sheet because it was just a means to an end, so I can delete that. And I also don't need this Power Query for the same reason, so I'll delete that. Now that I've only got the table 1 remaining, I can give it a name called Data. I can select it, go to Power Pivot, add this to my data model, and I've got the data loaded. I can then click Close, and if I ever need to change the DAX formula, I can click Edit DAX, and let's say there's a few rows I didn't need, I could edit it, click OK. If I go back to the Power Pivot and refresh it, the data will pull through. So that's how you can actually create any table of data that uses most DAX functionality inside Microsoft Excel. Now, worth mentioning, Microsoft Excel has an older DAX engine than Power BI, so not all functions are available and not all functions work, but most functions are actually available. Hope you found this interesting, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.